Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news analysis from a Taiwan perspective. I am Catherine Liu.
I'm Rath Wang. The U.S. House of Representatives' new Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party held its first hearing last Tuesday. The bipartisan committee aims to tackle the Chinese threat posed on the people, economy, and values of the United States. This is what the committee's chair, Mike Gallagher, had to say.
The threat posed by the CCP is not abstract. The CCP's aggression is not limited to Taiwan, the South China Sea, Hong Kong, or even Xinjiang, where two successive administrations, Republican and Democrat alike, have determined that the CCP is engaging in genocide. We see this aggression here at home.
Not limited to Taiwan. Joining us to discuss what that means today is Raymond Sung, Deputy CEO of the think tank Taiwan New Constitution Foundation, an expert in Taiwan's legal status and the region's geopolitics. Chen Fang-yu, Assistant Professor at Political Science at Soochow University, who is a visiting research fellow at George Washington University and the Global Taiwan Institute in Washington, D.C. Chen is an expert in U.S.-Taiwan-China relations. A warm welcome back to both Raymond and Fang-yu. Thank you.
We also hear later from Steve Yates, former White House Deputy Assistant, and Jimmy Quinn, National Security Correspondent at the National Review, on the Chinese threat to the American and Taiwanese public. Let's now talk about the U.S. Select Committee on the CCP. Raymond, what significance does this have since Taiwan has been living under the Chinese threat for over 7 decades? Taiwan's largest military or security guarantor, the U.S. seems to be waking up.
I encourage everyone to read the proceedings of this hearing. Actually, I think it's very interesting, especially the testimony given by former Vice Advisor to National Security, Mac Pottinger, and the former National Security Advisor, McMaster. They pointed to the ideology struggle that's always been with the CCP. It's not really about Chinese prosperous or Chinese competition with the United States, but what lie behind those rising of China. It's wanting to struggle for a global dominance, and not only for regional dominance, but also global dominance, and also extend to change of global order and rules. And so it's the innate quality of the rise of China and the dominance of CCP, ruling of the CCP, is anti-global order, or the free order and open order established by United States and its allies.
So this is a threat to democratic values,
yes,
including in Taiwan.
Including values and order, including Taiwan. Of course, on the other hand, the Taiwan's contingency given rise not only the Americans' concern, but also the international concern. As Secretary Blinken said, the Taiwan security is not only its own concern, but a concern of the whole entire world. And it's not an internal matter for China, as China claim based on its sovereignty.
Raymond, do you feel this wakening up is actually beneficial to Taiwan as countries?
You mentioned that Taiwan has always lived with the shadows posed by China, which is
interesting. But the world maybe not be able to see that.
And if you remember back to 20 years, when people are pondering about what the rising China means for the world, they see the prosperity and models, and a different model seems to propose by this rising China. But nowadays, only in the maybe last 6 or 5 years, people are noticing that the rise of China is not peaceful. It's not without a fundamental disruption to international order, as we understand, as we see in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea, when the manipulation of the rules and backed by military force, backed by coercive measures, imposed, backed up by economic capabilities and threat, which is coercive, which is not only assertive, but put everyone nearby and every nation's nearby under threat.
Coercive, indeed, this is a large move by the U.S. Do you feel that, given that the U.S. is seen as a leader in the world order, will countries follow the U.S.'s move?
Of course, also one aspect of those hearings is the soul-searching of the American actors, including the business actors, whether they have already played the role in assisting the rise of the unpeaceful rising of China, and also the governmental thinkers and think tank and agencies and policies about the fake, really proved wrong imagination of the rising China. A more prosperous China will bring a more open society within China, and to better protect the freedom and human rights of Chinese people, and to improve the whole human welfare for the global society, which all has been proven wrong. So the soul searching of the U.S. actors, and we see the calls made time and time again in the hearings that we should abandon those unrealistic imagination about what's the implication after the Chinese rise.
Do you see this as it wakening up?
Of course, awakening up, I will not say no. Much has to be done. Mac Pottinger said they are in minority. Actually, more and more people are being fooled or being holding misunderstandings or unrealistic imaginations about Chinese. And they pointed out that there are two phases of Chinese dealings. One is public, for example, open forums, for example, talking about China will stick to the open trade, free trade and investment, ensuring the world that China will stick to an open economy system. But on the other hand, what they did in the domestic situation is they extract costs from the enterprises and develop SOEs, state-owned enterprises. So they're double-edged, and there are two faces of those words. So they have to point it time and time again. Don't be fooled by what the Chinese leader or the CCP said. You have to watch closely what they really did and what the intention behind their words.
Fang-yu, I want to shift it a little bit to a technology application space. One of the major concerns from this select committee was TikTok. And right now, the federal employees only have 30 days to delete the app. But the committee still think it's not enough. They want the whole people as a group to never use the app anymore, to total ban from the United States. Why do you think the reason behind this strong application?
Actually, there's a growing concern about a concept we call it as a digital authoritarianism. That is, the current dictators will use the latest technologies to monitor and to rule. And most important of all, they use this app or the new tool in a global globally. So they use this. So you see that the TikTok has been downloaded for more than 3.5 billion times. So everybody uses these apps. And what can the Chinese authority use this? So according to the 2017 the Chinese National Intelligence Law, which stated that any organization or citizen shall support, assist, and cooperate with the state, with the state intelligence work in accordance with the law. So that means that the CCP can order the company to hand in the data they collected. Yeah.
But the mother company keeps saying that the server, the storage of the data is located in Singapore, not in mainland China. And they have said it for multiple times in the past several years. How come it doesn't delete the concern?
Actually, despite of the claim that the data, the server is located in the US and also Singapore, the parent company, the ByteDance, are all located in China. And also the app itself contains references to China-based infrastructure.
With all these concerns, do you feel that Taiwan should do the same? As we're seeing US legislators try to ban this app.
You mean ban this app for the whole society? That is a controversial one, so we can discuss it later. But for the government, our government has already ordered to ban all of our government-related facilities to use or to download TikTok. And also, it applies to European Union. Also, the latest one is Canada. So many countries has raised this concern. And I want to point out that internal leaked documents and recordings reveal that the TikTok International is directly controlled by the Chinese parent company ByteDance. Also, the leaked document also shows that there's a censorship on the content that is critical of the CCP. So there's a lot of cybersecurity concerns all over the world. So that is why so many countries, the government, are initiating these bans.
Yeah, do you think Taiwan should go as far as the United States have gone so far?
The United States is now discussing about this issue, and I think there's a consensus in the Congress. For me, I think I kind of agree that there's a myth that banning TikTok is a surprise of freedom of speech. But however, I want to remind all of you that freedom of speech or any kind of human rights in the society does not mean that you can do anything without the constraint by the law. So we know that the CCP is using a variety of tools, especially TikTok and the Douyin, and also a lot of other tools to monitor and to store people's data. Already, we already have a lot of evidence, so that we should discuss how to prevent for such a leak and such a cybersecurity loopholes in the society.
These seems to be concerns indeed. Going back to the committee, Raymond, Taiwan arms seems to be a large topic in that, and because of the war in Ukraine, there have been delays. Do you feel that this is giving China an upper hand because of the portrayed war in the Ukraine?
Of course, people are guessing about what's the possible timeline for Chinese to launch an attack or to prepare for that by launching coercive actions around Taiwan's waters. And one timeline is 2027. That's also coincident with the delivery of more advanced systems that Taiwan has already ordered. For example, anti-ship missiles, Harpoon system, or F-16 fighter jets, or anti-aircraft missiles. And those weapon systems can only be expected to be delivered by the time of 2027, which makes that the time prior to that, there's some loopholes in the Taiwan's defense capabilities.
How grave is this concern, though?
People are concerned because the concern was aggregated by the so-called competitions between Taiwan and Ukraine about U.S. weapon system, but it's not really a competition. It's because the weapon system required by both states, Ukraine and Taiwan, are really different. And then the problem is really related to the processing, the procedure of sale to deliver of weapons, and the export control of United States, which means that if you expedite those procedures, it could be remedied. It could be more speeded up, so to fill this gap of defense capability.
Which the committee is trying to do to expedite this.
So that's we see the calls made by the members associated with the House Select Committee on the CCP. Also, they are House representatives, so they have powers to really do something about it. We hope that we will see congressional actions or to push the defense procedures and the whole process within it.
Raymond, in terms of the concern, how concerning is this? Do you feel it could tip China to say they could make a different move, or do you feel the balance could be tipped?
Of course, the situation is not only fought on the ground or around the water, it's more on the multifaceted front, like political fronts. For example, the 2024 elections, what the Taiwanese citizens will express their wills, whether they're being threatened or being scared by it's a hollowed threat, verbal threats that if you stick to your democratic and the freedom systems, that the Chinese will not tolerate your existence at all. So you will be forced into a warlike situation. And we see this propagandas from the opposition parties and associates every day and every hour and on every issue. Whether Taiwanese have have sufficient distinguishing capability to really find our own goals and the meaning of our own societies, and willing to pay the price for it. And also the information from the cognitive warfare waged and propaganda warfare waged in Taiwan society. So election is one thing, and of course Taiwan is also facing the economic situation, which we need to work more closely to make our own domestic distribution of wealth more evenly, to really consolidate the will of people and to really distinguish ourselves more from Chinese society. So I mean, the war, the existence, the fighting for our existing way of life is fought on several fronts. It's a war because it's threatened being toppled by China.
Right, but the delay wouldn't be like a definite move to stop that in terms of all these different fronts that you just mentioned.
I think this is a continuing. It's very hard to put a definitive point of time to it. But may I also mention one thing is the resilience and the citizenryship spirit of Taiwanese, including our military personnel, whether we can fight for our own independent existence. We don't want to hold our own fate to an enemy and to a regime hostile to every value we've been fighting for the last
Which Taiwan is moving
years.
on in that direction.
Yeah.
We just spoke about the significance of the new selected committee on the CCP. Coming up next, we hear from Steve Yates, former White House Deputy Assistant on China's multifaceted threats, including TikTok.
Let's now hear from Steve Yates. Yates is a former White House Deputy Assistant to the Vice President for National Security Affairs and chair of the China Policy Initiative at the America First Policy Institute, based in Washington, D.C. He spoke to me about the Chinese threat and the psychological impact of TikTok. Let's take a look. Steve, could you talk about what the Select Committee on China is and what the committee aims to achieve?
It's a new development in the sense that there hasn't been a Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party before. And the chairman of the Select Committee, Congressman Mike Gallagher, used those words with intention. It's important to try to make clear to audiences at home and abroad that the Chinese Communist Party is the enemy of the Chinese people and also an adversary to the American way of life. That it is a challenge, not just in terms of human rights and other issues inside of China, and also not just in terms of what it does in the Asia Pacific and internationally, but that there are domestic policy and homeland challenges here in America that need to be addressed, that for far too long, China policy has been the purview of the State Department, Defense Department, the national security apparatus. But there's a lot of domestic issues whose time have come, and the public is now engaged.
You mentioned timing and that this is a new initiative. Steve, why now?
I think the COVID pandemic really brought home to the American people and a lot of people around the world that when you have a government like the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic, they don't really care about human dignity. They don't care about quality control. They don't care about honesty, integrity, and transparency. And the fact that regardless of what anyone's theory or evidence is about the precise actions that created and unleashed that COVID-19 virus, we know for a fact that it came out of China and that it was a deliberate government decision to allow international travel out of China, knowingly letting the virus out into the world, and then lying to international bodies and other counterpart governments about what had happened and what the precise knowledge of the virus was. It became a political weapon. And that, I think, is the core of what the Select Committee is looking at. From the beginning, the Communist Party of China did what it always does and is only really capable of doing, and that is engaging in political warfare. It used the virus as a domestic and international political weapon. And it, I think, has gone very, very far in that regard. And Americans, now that they feel like they are in a post-pandemic environment, want accountability, and they have seen other actions taken by China in the meantime, whether it was the genocide against the Uyghurs taking front stage, or the crushing of freedom in Hong Kong and taking the front stage, the threats against Taiwan that were very, very prominent in former Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, and then also this spy balloon incident and the fentanyl crisis in the United States. The list goes on. And so the Select Committee is cross-jurisdictional. In other words, it doesn't just do foreign affairs, just do trade, just do homeland security. It crosses over those stovepipes. It doesn't legislate, but it helps frame and dive deep into these issues to help give momentum to the Congress to deliver real policy that hopefully the Senate will consider and pass, and someday a White House would sign into law.
You mentioned a lot of items and details of how the threat from the Chinese Communist Party is looming and increasing. Steve, can you talk a bit about how TikTok is a threat to U.S. national security?
Well, it's not just a threat to U.S. national security. I think it's a threat to the Taiwan public, the Japan public, and any other group that deigns to think for itself and has a way of life that is at odds with what the Chinese communist model is. And basically, I see the Communist Party engaged in a cultural revolution 2.0, maybe short of traditional military conflict, using technology, economics, and any other means to exert pressure and influence. And basically, with that preamble, what TikTok represents is a vast data mining and profiling capability, but it's also married together with very advanced science-based psychological warfare and manipulation capabilities. This begins with hardware itself. It goes into social media generally. But if you have a device to which you are profoundly addicted because you get haptic or feelings that you can respond to when notifications come, and that these notifications disrupt your deeper thinking or any kind of consistent work patterns, that you seek refuge from normal life to have an escape in these social media platforms. It seems innocuous that you would have dancing or pet videos or cooking videos, what have you. But what also is happening without your consent and maybe even your knowledge is you are breaking normal patterns of interaction in your family, in your work, in your thinking. You're also getting manipulated. They learn more about how to make you agitated. There was an expose on Facebook that showed how their artificial intelligence was designed to try to sow division and anger because it would increase engagement on the platform. But imagine, if you're the Chinese Communist Party, you can use that same technology to sow division, doubt, dissent, disruption inside your enemy political systems and societies. So they could sow all of that inside Taiwan's democratic public or within America's democratic public. And so it's much, much more than just data security is national security. There's this deeper psychological weapon that is embedded in this. And if we are going to allow our publics to be subjected to that, they should make informed consent that that's what they're doing. And I just don't think anything with that level of intrusion into the human mind and our societal behavioral networks should be allowed if it has ties to the Communist Party of China, which is using these technologies to enhance control and human rights abuses and to weaken the free world.
Steve, there seems to be some criticism as to the ban that this would curtail freedom. How do you feel this can be balanced, as you mentioned the threat and how it poses a threat and false narrative to the free world?
I just don't believe this is an issue of free speech. Anyone is able to create these kinds of platforms. If we wanted to have free speech, are we going to allow the Communist Party of China to control all communications inside Taiwan? After 9/11, were we going to allow Al-Qaeda or other kind of extremists to have free reign on very, very addictive and intrusive technology platforms in our education systems and our societies? Are we going to allow our government employees and organizations to have technology that has ties to these evil organizations that seek to do us very real harm? Of course not. And so just like you can't have free trade with unfree people, you can't engage in free speech on platforms that are controlled by these unfree entities. And that's why I think that it's completely legitimate to look at them as a target of exclusion and banning.
You just heard Steve Yates speak to Rath about the threat China poses to the U.S. public and the Taiwanese people. Finally, I want to go a little bit deeper. As Steve mentioned, that TikTok can have deep psychological effect on its users. And right now, Europe and Canada also push for restrictions. And do you see more democratic countries have this awareness related to its cyber security, as you mentioned, and also its mental power on its users?
I think there are more and more evidence and studies showing that what the TikTok can do. Also, so they are typically showing you some interesting movies, pretending to be just entertainment only. However, sometimes they can precisely project some political information to the users by their magic algorithm.
So you're saying it's a propaganda tool?
Yeah, it is a propaganda tool, and as long as and also they have the privacy issues and stealing the data. So there's multiple questions for the TikTok. So there's a very important concept called sharp power that more and more studies find that China is using the democratic institutions, especially the freedom of speech, to infiltrate into academics, culture, and media. And they pour in a lot of resources to buy influence. And also they can spread out the propaganda and project this propaganda more precisely using the latest technology like TikTok. So how can the democracies respond to that? We should put into a long-term context as that more and more people know the importance of hybrid warfare. So the war does not occur on the war zone, but it also occurs in our daily lives. So the hybrid warfare includes the attacks on the information, on the media, on our other important infrastructure. So that I think more and more democracies should find out some ways to prevent such damage.
Would something around, say, not banning it, but actually informing the public of the dangers of TikTok be more effective in your view?
I think both can be done. So we should do more education. I think that is fundamental to democracies because democracies always encourage people to engage in the public affairs. We should engage more people to discuss, but the precondition is that the people get correct information so that we can discuss about the public affairs.
So a ban would not be, say, in violation of democratic values?
Yeah, because the democracies need some protective methods. So that if we find more evidence about such tools that can be used by the dictators, then we should do something to prevent such tools to be used permanently.
Yeah, to protect the people. Yeah.
Raymond, I wanted to move on just in terms of the Chinese threat. It's not limited to TikTok. There seems to be other countries, more countries in the region that are aware of this. We saw Japan and New Zealand come together in a statement addressed just a few days ago with the foreign ministers Yoshimasa Hayashi and Nania Mahuta addressing how they're going to strengthen their security cooperation. What does this mean? Do you feel these countries are serious about this?
I think the case of New Zealand is a curious one because back in 2008, New Zealand signed a comprehensive free trade pact with China. But in the coming decades after that, gradually New Zealand shifting its security stance and taking a more tougher stance against China. There are several issues. One is going back to what Fang-yu just mentioned about political interference witnessed experienced in New Zealand society using digital tools like TikTok and other social medias. not only New Zealand or Australia, they find Chinese infiltration within their own domestic politics, including buying up politicians, including influence public opinions toward Chinese favor, and including interference with any issues which has a relationship with the Chinese policy within the domestic politics. So people are tired and more wary about this. And also the public awareness has been raised, finding that the security concern was given rise by the Chinese-made security cameras, and which has also a backdoor malware to send the image and the data collected back to China and Chinese government's hand. And people are aware of it, and that was seen as a security concern. Also, about Chinese influence entering to the Pacific Island states, about the bringing the big power rivalry into the South Pacific areas, and using the, for example, interests like fishing industry expansions to influence the geopolitical politics there. And finally, of course, the New Zealand is now a Western Island, also a member of the Five Eye Alliance. And so it's no wonder that Japan seeks to deepen their security cooperation with New Zealand. For example, in purchasing and acquiring some anti-ship missile systems like Tomahawk system, they need large data, quantity of data, and very, very precise strategic data, which of course having the New Zealand's cooperation on board is very crucial for supplying those to the function of those anti-ship missile system.
As these countries take China more seriously, does this also translate to support for Taiwan?
If Taiwan is still standing on the camp of maintaining rule of law and democracy, and showing the world enough resilience about not giving in their ground and to fighting for our own existence and our own values.
Which Taiwan currently is.
I hope it will continue and even grow stronger.
Fang-yu, I want to focus on Indo-Pacific strategy a little bit more. We can see Japan recently conduct joint military exercise with the US and India. How do you see in defending the more and more intensive China threat, how do you see other Asian countries coping with it?
Well, Japan is taking this issue very seriously. And it's now changing its policies of defense, pouring more budgets and resources into that. And the latest is declared by Japan's Prime Minister Kishida that on March 1st, that Japan is now setting a goal of developing autonomous defense force that is able to work without fully dependent on the US. That is, the Japanese they want to develop something more than expected. And South Korea may have a more direct impact on the Indo-Pacific deterrence as well. And now, South Korea is going to cooperating with Japan because they are discussing about a peace pact to sign with Japan. And the Philippines recently agreed on the US to establish 4 new military bases. And that is, I think, in general, that those are part of the efforts by the US to build up an alliance, a democratic alliance to contain China. Because the US know that it is impossible to contain China by the US alone. So, so for example, if there's a war, armed force conflict, then there's a logistics supply and the storage and for the emergence, and also the US have to use military bases from different countries. So it must cooperate with its allies. So in the Indo-Pacific, we see alliances forming. And the US is taking a leading role of creating such an alliance.
And is this to cover the elephant in the room, to prevent a Taiwan invasion?
Yes, it is very clear that the US want to maintain so-called status quo. That is, China does not rule Taiwan. Also, they want to keep a free and open Indo-Pacific. and that is a core national interest of the U.S. So yeah, so preventing such an invasion is a core interest for the U.S.
We just discussed how other countries are toughening up their stance on China. Coming up next, we hear from Jimmy Quinn on why Taiwan is top on the agenda of Select Committee.
Jimmy Quinn is the national security correspondent for the National Review, one of the oldest right-leaning publications in the United States. He is also a frequent commentator in the Washington Post, Political, and several of Taiwan's leading news outlets. Quinn shared with me what the new Select Committee means for Taiwan. Let's take a look. Jimmy, can you talk a bit about where the government is in terms of cracking down on China and properly dealing with the Chinese threat?
I think that there's been an awakening over the past 3 or 4 years, but in particular, in the past few weeks, as more Americans are waking up to this, as they've seen the spy balloon with PLA backing flying over the continental U.S. I mean, it's a Chinese military surveillance device that some experts say could deliver weapons in the future. So this is something that more people are becoming aware of. And in Congress, there's increasing bipartisan support for actually translating that into action, into a regulatory regime that can deal both with the Chinese Communist Party's human rights atrocities and preventing Americans from being complicit in that, and also preventing us from being complicit in the Chinese military's buildup. Which a lot of reporting has shown has been fueled in part by American investment. So there are all these wonky new things that people are trying to get across the finish line, whether it's the Biden administration cracking down on tech exports and outbound investment potentially, or it's Congress stepping in and saying we need to look at this in a completely new way. We need to take drastic steps to limit things like TikTok, which is linked to ByteDance. It's a company under ByteDance which has extensive ties to the Chinese Communist Party. So there's a lot to do, and people are very focused on that heading into the new Congress.
What do you expect to substantially come out of the Select Committee on the CCP?
So I think it's particularly important when it comes to alerting the American people about the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party across multiple domains: economic, ideological, and human rights, in terms of technology. And you already have the standing congressional committees, whether it's the foreign affairs committees or intelligence or armed services, that deal with a lot of this stuff from the legislative angle. But the Select Committee on China, or on countering the Chinese Communist Party, is going to be particularly important when it comes to bringing new facts to light, using the subpoena power to investigate different potentially unethical practices that are going on in the corporate space or in government or elsewhere. And the results of these investigations are going to be highly significant, I think. We'll probably learn a lot about the gaps in U.S. policy toward China that currently need to be filled. So there's that, and also just presenting this case to the American people that things need to change when it comes to our policy toward China. We saw this in the first hearing 2 days ago, where national security experts and a Chinese dissident came out swinging and basically said what we're dealing with is an unprecedented threat in the 21st century to our way of life. And this is the case that people are going to continue to make over the next several months. So it's definitely something to watch. We're going to see a lot come out of it.
Do you expect Taiwan to come up high in the committee as well in terms of priorities?
Taiwan will be a focus. And we saw this in the conversations that took place during the first hearing this week as well. But I think something that Chairman Mike Gallagher, who recently, as you know, traveled to Taiwan and met with President Tsai, he's very focused on making sure that the Taiwanese are going to get the arms that they need to be able to deter potential Chinese invasion in the future. There are massive backlogs of armed deliveries totaling something near $20 billion reportedly. And figuring out what's going on there and having the select committee work with the other committees of jurisdiction is going to be a major focus for them. That's something that's going to be highly significant. Learning how Americans can support Taiwan and what policy changes need to be put in place. So that's absolutely going to be a focus for the committee, but also for this Congress as well, with reports that Kevin McCarthy might be visiting Taiwan sometime in the next several months. So it's going to be a big focus. We'll see more congressional delegations. We'll see more diplomatic exchanges and legislation to help arm the Taiwanese military or to help deter a Chinese invasion as well.
You just heard Jimmy Quinn speak to Rath about why Taiwan is core to Select Committee. Now let's talk about how the global pushback is influencing Chinese foreign policy. Bipartisan support on getting tough on China is at its all-time high. Do you think there's a shift on U.S.-China policy?
Oh, yes. If we take a longer view, of course, there's a very, very remarkable shift.
Yes.
Starting from the latter half of Trump administration and continuing by the Biden administration now. And of course, the people and politicians in Washington, D.C. are more and more aware of the sharpness, sharp power exercise of China, and which is to the detriment of American people and American value and economy. And of course, that's the founding aims to getting those concrete plans to be formed by the Select Committee. And of course, and one thing is also noteworthy is in the testament given before the committee, Select Committee, about the nature of the governance or nature of the CCP ideology, which is interesting because it's or we see this kind of rhetoric more in the Trump administration officials, like that the Chinese rise is innately is not peaceful, that China is destined or intended firmly to compete for super dominance and supremacy over the world, and not only to be satisfied, for example, to be a regional hegemony or just to compete with the United States. It wanted to change the order of the global society, which is born with the Communist Party's ideology, which influenced every aspect of Xi Jinping's rule on China and also its foreign policy. That goes into the DNA of the CCP, which is remarkable. It's also alarming, and it's with the better exposure of it, hopefully it will get people awakened.
Fang-yu, we've seen a lot of countries push back, given what Raymond mentioned in terms of Chinese foreign policy. And do you feel China is recalibrating this, given all the global lash back or pushback on that?
Yeah.
I don't know what the dictators think, because there's a rising of Chinese nationalism there, and also the dictator always have to show the muscles to respond to the hawks domestically. So it is very difficult to predict whether China's authorities will recalculate this.
But have you seen signs of softening of their foreign policy, given the U.S. is pushing back? We've seen New Zealand come out.
I don't see a softening sign, because the wolf warrior diplomacy continues. For example, after the Congress visit to Taiwan, we see China's embassies will send some coercive letters to the Congress persons. So the wolf warrior diplomacy is still there. And also, yeah, sometimes they will pretend to be softening, but I don't think they are sincere.
Do you feel the main direction is still the same, remains?
Yeah, the same, because they are pursuing a global dominance, as we discussed earlier today.
What about in terms of Taiwan? There seems to be, as we've seen with the meetings of the CCP leadership with the Premier Li Keqiang coming out saying that He wants more dialogue with Taiwan. Do you feel it's handing carrots to Taiwan, and will that sustain?
It is carrots, but also there are a lot of sticks there. So I don't think it's an olive branch. Instead, it is a complicated, sophisticated, threatening strategy as well, because China is still showing the muscles by the fighter jets and the warships around Taiwan every day. And so, so even though they call for talks, they set up a lot of preconditions. For example, earlier last month, when the Vice President of KMT, Charlie Yan, visited China, Chinese officials say that we welcome all of the dialogues if Taiwan admits the 1992 consensus and if anyone who is anti-Taiwan independence. That is a clear precondition. That is, China is calling for someone that can give up the Taiwan sovereignty so that they will resume the talks. So that is a precondition that Taiwan cannot accept. So we don't see that is an olive branch, or we don't see that is really a sincere talk.
So in essence, nothing has changed in terms of Taiwan?
No.
With Taiwan, Mike Gallagher, the head of the Select Committee, came to Taiwan in an undisclosed meeting and met with President Tsai. Do you feel, Raymond, that that could actually be of substantial support for Taiwan, given that he's head of the committee?
Yes, I think Mike Gallagher made a speech and also published in Wall Street Journal after his visit to Taiwan. And he met with our president, vice president, Minister of Defense and Foreign Relations, Foreign Affairs, and our National Security Bureau's chief. And that's what he said. Taiwan is on the front lines of authoritarian expansion. We must search hard power to deter a Chinese Communist Party invasion before it's too late. In particular, we should move quickly to clear the nearly 19 billion backlog of foreign military sales items that have been approved but not delivered to Taiwan. You can sense the sense of urgency in his statement that we should act quickly and decisively, and to render support to Taiwan before it's too late. And that's for deterrence, to deterring the possible thinking of a Chinese threat. And of course, he also advanced those agendas in House of Congress and in the Select Committee, which is, I think, it's very concrete support for Taiwan.
We just talked about the new U.S. House Committee aimed at tackling the Chinese threat. That includes the banning of TikTok. Let us know in the YouTube section if you believe Taiwan should also ban TikTok, given its deep psychological influence. Also, if you like our shows, please subscribe to the Taiwan Talks YouTube channel at Taiwan Talks 2022.
Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and we'll see you next time.